In a universe full of ideas, we draw lightness from the dark to a place where opposites attract. Right meets left, positive touches negative, sparking an explosion of truth. Because politics makes strange bedfellows.
You know, it seems to me that the real war that's going on, I mean, beyond anything about, Nazis and like that, which is real also. I mean, there's real Nazis here, real Heil Hitler Nazis, torturing, murdering.
And they've been there for 100 years, long before anybody ever heard of Adolf Hitler or the Nazi Party. The Ukrainian nationalists, as I often say, were the OG Nazis, the original gangsters.
That's a fact. Where I am right now in Donetsk, this is Donbass. This is the area, the Ukrainian, southern Russian area, the Donbass, the Don River Basin. This is the area where a lot of the original Russian Revolution was fought. Mm-hmm. This is the area where the Russian Civil War was fought.
Very historic ground.
Was horrific atrocities and stuff. The White Russians against the Red Bolsheviks, which, a lot of people have no clue that, you ask somebody, well, did the United States ever invade Russia?
Yes.
Yeah, they did.
We certainly did.
The United States, France, Japan, England sent 50,000 troops.
The Expeditionary Force, right?
100 years ago, like 1921. Right. Mm-hmm. And 50,000 troops on the side of the whites. They did a lot of atrocities. They did a lot of fighting here. And so, this land.
Even then, also, we were trying to affect regime change, basically. We were
exactly.
Even back get rid of the Bolshevik government.
And when the German Nazis invaded the Soviet Union, they occupied the city. Donetsk was then called Stalino. Mm-hmm. And the German Nazis occupied it for 700 days. That's less than 2 years. And in less than 2 years, they murdered over 100,000 citizens of this city in less than 2 years. There's a place about 1 kilometer from where I'm sitting right now. It's called the 4-4 Mine. It was a coal mine shaft. It was 5 by 3 meters across, and it was 365 meters deep, which is more than 1,000 feet deep. And that was the disposal place for the German Nazis for their victims in the city of Donetsk when they occupied it. More than 75,000 people were thrown down this hole. It was 365 meters deep when the Germans came. And when they left, it was 65 meters deep. And the other 300 meters, which is 1,000 feet, was filled up by human bodies. They threw, whole families at a time down this hole. And so these are the people, and the people that we're fighting today, defending ourselves against today, are the people that say Heil Hitler and Slava Bandera and think that was cool and want to do that again.
And they want to do it again. They're very clear about that. And, I do want to dig into the history of all this a bit more, because a lot of people in the West don't understand geographically and ideologically how divided Ukraine has been for more than a century now. That, Western Ukraine has always been that hotbed of Ukrainian nationalism, Nazism, because of their history with Poland and Germany during the First World War, in the interwar years, the 20s, the 30s, and then, of course, when they came together in World War II. After World War II, of course, we know that the Banderites, the OUN, the UPA got in bed with the CIA and MI6, and they were used essentially to wage guerrilla warfare against the Soviet Union. So, in many ways, that Western regime change objective has not changed in 100 years. We had a couple of brief respites where we were more friendly with the Soviets. Certainly, we were allies for a brief time during World War II. But as soon as that war was over, Winston Churchill just couldn't wait to invade Russia. He had that crazy plan called Operation Unthinkable. I don't know if you're
That's
aware
right.
of that.
George Patton too was a big fan of
That's
the
right.
idea of
Yep.
fighting. My grandfather was in Patton's Third Army. He was a tank commander. He was
Wow.
one of the first Americans into Germany from the western side, and he hated Patton, by the way. But
I think most of his own men hated Patton.
You have a very good understanding of the history of Ukraine, and the Donbass, that most Americans would have no clue about, but that is a fact that the OUN, that from before, I mean, they were waiting for the German Nazis to come in. These are the ones, and there's photos of it, the girls giving flowers to the German Nazis, offering the bread and salt, on the towel. And, and the worst war criminals. It's funny, the German term Schweinhund, which means pig dog. The Germans made that up about the Ukrainians because they have these hats with these weird little triangular things on the brim.
Yeah, I've seen those. Uh-huh.
And they called them pig dogs. They said it was like pig ears or something. Even the SS thought these dudes were too much.
That's true. That is very, very true. And Hitler was using them. There was never any promise made of Ukrainian independence, but that's the reason that the Banderites and the Ukrainian nationalists were supposedly allied with Hitler. They believed that once the war was won, and the Nazis did kind of dangle that carrot in front of them.
Sure, but only an idiot trusts.
But why would you believe Hitler? Exactly.
Yeah.
The man who never kept a promise.
I mean, and again, in that same statement, it applies to, the Russian foreign ministry these days. Why did they believe when NATO said, "Oh, we're not going to expand 1 inch eastward"? Why did they believe when, the Minsk I agreement, the Minsk II agreement? Why did they, a couple of weeks ago when the African presidents came to visit Moscow, and Putin showed the treaty, that supposedly was signed back in March of 2022, where, the security agreements were made. The Ukrainians signed it. The Russians signed it. The Russians moved back from near Kiev, from Bucha, and it's based on this agreement. And as soon as they did, Boris Johnson came and said, "No, we're not agreeing to that," and they threw it right out the window. How many? It's like the old Charlie Brown, where he goes to kick the football and Lucy's holding the football. And every time he comes to kick it, she moves it and he lands on his back. How many times?
Many times.
And, and it's like so many things, at some point, you can't really say, "Oh, they're so stupid." You can't say they're stupid anymore, because when they do the same thing and get the same result every time, it's not that they're stupid, it's that they're doing it on purpose.
Well, that's very interesting, Russell, because I've long had a question about this, and I've posed this same question to a lot of different guests on the show, including the Russian ambassador to the UN, Dmitry Polyansky. I've asked Scott Ritter about it. I've asked Kevin Michelizzi about it, asked John Mark Dugan about it, and I want to ask you too. Um, it seems to me, and especially I want to ask you because you really know your Soviet history. And during the Soviet Union years, post World War II, during the Cold War, the Khrushchev years, and I guess, later you could maybe lay some blame on Brezhnev for not dealing with this Ukrainian Nazi problem. I mean, they got Bandera, KGB assassinated him in Munich in
In Munich,
1959.
yes.
And yes, they were able to capture and imprison many of them, but still, Khrushchev gave Crimea back or gave Crimea to Ukraine. Khrushchev himself was Ukrainian.
He lives
Gorbachev.
here. He lived in Donetsk. He lived in Petrovsky district in our house and near where our house is.
No kidding. Wow.
He was a coal miner.
Yeah.
In Donetsk.
That's right. So I was curious to get your thoughts on that. It's where and how and why the Soviet Union and then later the Russian Federation failed time and time again to deal with this problem on their doorstep for 60 years.
They
and we're
worked
still
very hard to
with
deal with it. First of all, I mean, in the 10 years after, the end of the Second World War, when the OUN and OPA were still active in the woods around, like that. I mean, I think they killed like 100,000
got a lot of them.
Nazi rebels, I mean, and these guys, they really were the worst. I mean, besides maybe some of the Japanese, but, the Ukrainian auxiliary units were among the very, very worst of the war criminals of the whole Second World War. I mean, the things they did, normal people can't even imagine, and don't want to hear about, and I mean, and it's beyond question. I mean, there's photographs, there's historical documents beyond any question about what they did. And so, I mean, and that's the thing, I mean, like talking about like recent news, just the most horrific and tragic thing. Today I just saw that Erdogan in Turkey has released all those Azov bastards that were supposed to be held in Turkey till the end of the hostilities.
Supposed to be. And, so what happened there?
Well, I can tell you what happened is the Russian diplomats got ass rammed, right there in public, and I got to say that, as bad as, I mean, we're not, let me put it like this, as incompetent as the military situation has been dealt with by the Russian Federation, Ministry of Defense, over the course of the special military operation, and before that too. I mean, okay, so as incompetent as that has been done, as many egregious mistakes have been made, as many opportunities have been lost, as many chances, as many failures to do what needed to be done have happened. And the same thing you can say with the economic war, which economic war, military war, it's the two sides of the same coin. You can tell exactly how the Donbass war is going by looking at the exchange rate between the Russian ruble and the US dollar.
Good point.
And the more rubles it takes to buy the US dollar, the less Russia is winning. And at the same time, I mean, as bad, I mean, the Russians left 300 billion US dollars in foreign exchange and gold reserves in other countries that has now been frozen by those enemy countries.
Right.
And the Russian central bank instead of saying, if they owe Canada $50 million for, I don't know, whatever, instead of saying, okay, we'll go ahead and take it out of that $300 billion that's frozen there in Canada, they go ahead and pay it. And so the economic war and the military war have both had terrible shortcomings, mistakes, and failures, and again, to the point where you have to ask, is it possible for anyone to be this stupid, or are they doing it on purpose? But in the diplomatic front, the treaties that Russia has signed, particularly, over the last 20 years, you can't name one where they didn't get just completely screwed to the floor, and so now there's talk, in the fall, we're going to have peace negotiations, and we'll just take Zaporozhye and Lugansk and Donetsk and Kherson oblasts, and then we'll make the peace. And that's not the peace. That's the humiliating defeat. And
it still doesn't solve the problem, Russell. This is the argument that I keep making, and I would think you're going to agree, is that the problem has always been the Nazis, the Ukrainian nationalists, and they're not going to give up.
They've been coming I don't agree. It's not the Ukrainian Nazis. Years. It's the American and European Nazis.
Yes, and we're backing the Ukrainian ones.
Here it is right here.
Yes.
This whole war, it's not Ukraine against Russia. It's not even NATO against Russia. This war is the war of the parasite class, the global parasite class, against humanity. I'm a Russian Orthodox Christian and a communist too, but I'll tell you that, the love of money is the root of all evil. It's funny the way that it's actually a verse from the Bible, the words of Jesus Christ, and it gets shortened and changed around a lot in English, and, you hear it all the time. Oh, money is the root of all evil. And that's not what he said. He said the love of money is the root of all evil. And indeed it is. And the people today in Russia that are making money off of this war, I mean, they're the biggest enemy of the Russian people is the oligarchs and parasites in Moscow today. And I mean that. And they're the enemies of the future of humanity. And it's not necessarily very safe for me to say that, but
I was going to say, be careful, because I know there are laws in Russia.
It is the truth. And I've said since
what you're saying is true. And also I wanted to ask you as a communist, because I know that the communist movement, there is great division among communists, particularly in Europe, that, for example, in Russia, the Communist Party is the second biggest party in Russia and generally supports Putin, generally is not opposing him anyway. But there are communist parties in other parts of the world who do not support Russia in this conflict because they view this as an imperialist war between two imperialist powers, imperialist Russia versus imperialist NATO countries. And so I wanted to ask your thoughts on that, Russell.
Okay, well, of course, we can answer that very quickly and easily. And if Russia is an imperialist power, name all the countries that Russia has invaded
there you go.
in the 21st century or in the last 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And yet, as you say, there is certainly a oligarch class that is in charge in Russia, certainly a capitalist class.
Very much so, and
there are war profiteers there too, just like there are
here. Very much so. And
And that's just real talk. You know, there are a
Yeah,
lot of
it is
people out
real
there
talk.
who
It
are
is. That's, I mean, that's
fanboys for Russia, and I know
exactly. It's
you're
the
not.
elephant in the room.
Right. And I know you have to be careful what you say, and I don't want to get you in trouble
Well, I mean,
with the
you
with the
know,
government.
I'm not the kind of guy that's careful about what I say. I say what I think,
That's why
and I
we
don't care
love
who
you.
likes it or not. But I'll tell you this: this is something that's well worth understanding. First of all, in this war, it is the war between the oligarch, parasite, billionaire class and humanity. They are right now, all the billionaires on earth, they have their own deal going, and they're working to get rid of about 90% of us, make the rest into sex slaves, to organ donors, to whatever, for dinner, And so every billionaire on this planet is a thief. No one can work hard enough to actually earn $1 billion, which is $1,000 million. The biggest danger to the Russian hope for victory in this war against 21st century fascism is the parasites and collaborators in Moscow. And I'm not saying that Vladimir Putin is one of them.
Right, but
And
you're
I'm
saying
not
he needs to
saying,
clean his own house. Is that what you're saying?
well, I'm not saying that he is one of them. I am not saying that he is controlled by them. I don't believe that at all, and I'm not saying it. But it's beyond question that obviously he does not control them, and he needs to take control of them.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.